Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Palm Springs. Thank you. I am Barbara Walters. I've come out of retirement to do this one last segment of The View. So I appreciate the fact that you all have gotten up so early to meet our wizards of punditry in a few minutes. Throughout the year, LeadingAge's planning committee, it's chaired by Bill Platt, the CEO of LeadingAge, tracks the trends in our field that affect what we as providers do. A year ago, we decided to invite a group of leaders to comment on the trends. And that's how Pundits and Predictions was born. This year, we have invited a different group of wonderful, varied leaders in our field to do the same. These are pillars of prognostication, wizards of punditry, which Gehm has told me means you can have an opinion without having any knowledge or expertise, which is the fun of it. And people who are known to speak their mind. So let's meet them, find out who they are, and what qualifies you to be a pundit, Molly Forrest. Introduce yourself.
I'm Molly Forrest. I'm the CEO and president of the LA Jewish Home. My apologies for my voice, but for those who saw me yesterday, I do have a voice today. What qualifies me to chat about where we are going is 42 years of working in senior health care for the government, for-profit, and not-for-profit. Be nimble, be quick, Jack, jump over the candlestick. Certainly applies to the age in which we live today. So I hope to share a bit of what we have learned about all those three things.
And I thought you called it Mr. Toad's Wild Ride, right? You can talk about that later. Doug.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Doug Shoemaker. I'm the president of Mercy Housing California. And Joanne, I think, told us to give, or told me at least, to give a two-word answer. So my particular qualification for being able to expound here is a very brief and disastrous career as a high school debater. So that's it.
I knew there was a reason we selected you.
So based on that, I'm here.
Yes.
I'm Linda Trowbridge, and I'm the president of the Center for Elders Independence in the Bay Area, which is a PACE organization. And that's my most recent position, and have been in healthcare for a very long time in most of the aspects of that. My qualifications for today is actually I was a successful debater in high school and won state tournaments and almost got to go to nationals.
All right.
My father always told me I could sell ice in Alaska, and we argue in our family as a sport.
All right. That's why we put
I'm turning off my mic.
That's why we put you next to him to help him along, okay? Todd.
I'm Todd Murch. I'm the president and CEO of Eskaton. I've been at Eskaton for 33 years and seen a lot of things. I've never been a pundit before. I don't know if I'm qualified. All I know is that the longer I do it, the more opinions I have, and the more opinions I have, the more it seems to pop out. So we'll see how that goes.
David.
I'm Dave Gehm. I think I'm the token Midwesterner on the panel this morning, so I don't know what that means, but we'll find out, I guess. By day, I'm the CEO of Wellspring Lutheran Services in Michigan, and I also serve as chair of LeadingAge National, and so it's good to be with you. My qualifications for being a pundit are very, very simple. I have two teenage daughters. I'm used to having opinions and never being right.
All right. So now you've met our motley crew, and let's just dive right into it. The first topic I'd like to explore is the not-for-profit difference. Many people are questioning what is the not-for-profit difference, particularly as we see many not-for-profit members divest Medicaid nursing homes, and the for-profits primarily providing Medicaid and low-income care, at least in the nursing home sector. will be the not-for-profit difference in the future? Dave, you want to start us off?
Sure. So when we think about, real quick, think about the history of nonprofits and how we got to where we are. Nonprofits, by definition, started in this nation to fill needs in community that weren't being met. Hospitals in particular, particularly really kind of blowing up onto the scene post-Civil War with the tremendous need for care. And so the kind of modern nonprofit was born in the early 1900s that began to really organize around that. And many of our members have a history that goes back, decades and decades and decades. Again, looking at that, getting their start by filling needs in communities that otherwise weren't profitable by definition. And so communities organized, volunteers, donors, leadership came along and filled those needs. And I think the challenge for us in this era now, we think about our business models as nonprofits that look an awful lot like the for-profit world.
Exactly.
And frankly, for-profit businesses who do a fair amount of community good in terms of their philanthropic giving, the way they engage community. That line is so blurred now. I think the big question for us is, how are we going to kind of live this nonprofit mission? What are the unmet needs in our culture, particularly around aging services, that we need to be thinking about and stepping into? Kind of going back to our roots of identifying community needs and stepping in and filling them. It's hard work. And often nonprofits have created markets where they didn't exist. I think about assisted living being the more kind of recent one in the 90s. And for-profits then kind of rushed in to fill that space because we knew how to do it, but we didn't know how to scale it. And so there's an example, I think, of us as nonprofits seeing a need, building a business model, filling the need, and then kind of losing that edge because we weren't able to scale it. And so I think the challenge for us is going to be to figure out where's the next need, where's that going to be, how are we going to fill it?
But if you're a market rate CCRC, and you are a very successful market rate CCRC, one has to ask, well, what is the difference between that and a for-profit? Todd, I know you've done a lot of thinking about this. What's your take?
Well, I think that's why you hear a lot of stutter and stammer when people ask, you're a for-profit CCRC, why do you deserve a tax exemption? I think this subject's been coming up a lot lately here at LeadingAge California and in other forums, and I think it's really good. I think there's a lot of confusion about it. As I said a minute ago, I think part of it is over time we've lost an adequate and clear definition of what it means to be a nonprofit and bring nonprofit value. There's even a lot of confusion on constituents' parts about the difference between a charity or a foundation or a tax-exempt business. There's a lot of diversity in this room. I'd say it's an easy explanation for those in this room who are basically affordable housing organizations. That's an easy discussion. I'd say PACE is also. I'd say when you get into the very, if you have a lot of your revenue stream coming from what people are going to generally define as market rate businesses, that's independent, assisted memory care, CCRCs, that's where the huge expansion is. That's where a lot of the for-profit footprint is. A lot of folks in your community, if that's what you run, may not even recognize that you're a nonprofit until you tell them. I think that's where the real struggle is. But I think the reality is for the market rate is that it should be thought of as a tax-exempt business as opposed to a charity or foundation. So I think there needs to be a lot of work done, and I think the association and other parties like that are a good place to start about coming up with a better definition. I know a lot of people get in, I think, locked into social accountability reports because there's this idea that if you can't demonstrate it, the IRS is going to come down on your back. But when I look at social responsibility reports, my own interpretation is when I see organizations still claiming Medi-Cal days in California as a social responsibility, I think that company's struggling with identifying the value they bring. The other thing I've seen, and I think we ought to let these folks come to the forefront, is those organizations that are lucky enough to have foundation executives. I see those foundation executives articulating the value of a nonprofit a lot more than the CEOs and operations people. And I think we ought to let them kind of move to the forefront. They talk a lot about the nonprofit role in building communities, and with the population aging as fast as it is, there's going to need more community and cooperative approaches, and that's sort of the nexus where nonprofits really provide value to the greater population. So to sum up, I think a lot of it's just confusion in the definition, and I think a lot of it is being a little bit squeamish about a lot of the market rate revenue and where do we deliver a value beyond resident assistance funds and things like that we typically all have.
What's your view on this, Linda?
My view, having been part of not-for-profits most of my career, has been that not-for-profit organizations stay in aspects of care and business when it is no longer profitable for those who find a profit. So insurance companies are a classic example of jumping in and out of lines of business, in and out of Medicare, in and out of Medicaid. They're all back in now because they see a huge bolus of money that's there, or they have to play in order to get to get a seat at the table. So I think that there's lots of money in some of those market rate CCRCs today, and I think the key is to take those profits and invest them in need and help the smaller organizations get to scale. Not-for-profits were usually born out of incredible ability to take on risk and to identify something that hasn't been met, where there's no proof in the pudding, if you will, and to invent it and make it go.
Right.
Then we get stymied in how to get it to scale. So
That's
if
right.
we partner with those who have resources and those who don't, and get over the fear of being innovative or of trying something new, of leveraging technology, there's so much opportunity out there right now in the aging world for not-for-profits to grab it and take it. It's interesting that in my part of the world, there's only money if you take care of the poorest of the poor. We can't figure out how to get into the commercial markets. Very unusual, and we need to go that direction in order to continue to serve the frailest and the poorest. So it's the opposite problem. But I think there will always be a place for not-for-profits because I think they don't back out. The core reason for being as a not-for-profit organization seldom changes or wanes. Big corporations come and die.
Well, this is a related question, so you might want to react to this. But the most of the growth in the senior living field in the state of California is by for-profits. The not-for-profits are not growing anywhere near as fast. In fact, they have plateaued in many areas. What are the implications of that for our sector? Molly, you have a for-profit background as well as a not-for-profit background. What are the implications?
I think that not-for-profits for a long time were, as Linda said, risk-taking. And they went into ventures not necessarily because it made a business sense to do so, but because it was the right thing to do. And as not-for-profits, frankly, found other ways to access different revenues, they quit looking at business opportunities that came up and got more complacent. For a long time, not-for-profits have huge waiting lists, people wanting to get in. You don't have to worry about marketing. You don't have to necessarily be accountable for the outcomes as strongly. I think that not-for-profits took comfort in all that. I think to the extent that the for-profits have looked, even in nursing home field, being able to scale, as Dave said and Todd talked about, not-for-profits got insular in that we don't reach across the table to other not-for-profits or for-profit in our community and try and create the partnerships. And that when we see opportunities, and since LA is a hotbed of the duals right now, we're doing a lot of partnerships that probably 10 years ago we would not have looked at in the same way. But when you open your door and look out there, there are so many opportunities for us to provide a different aspect of looking at qualitative factors that a not-for-profit looks at more for a marketing and compliance issue, where a not-for-profit also looks at it more personally associated with the resident. Last, I would say that the whole world of affordable care is moving towards judgment on outcomes. And if we don't find a way to capture that wave and be accountable with more than social accountability reports, then we won't be in this business. So all of us have to do a lot of soul searching, I think.
David, you were about to say something?
Well, I was going to pick up on something Linda said, and I think one of the things we have to challenge ourselves with as nonprofits doing the work we do is whether or not, or to what extent we allow mission and how we express it to define who we are versus the default position that's developed, I think, over the years, where we've allowed our current business models to define who we are. And when we get locked into that mindset that says, okay, we are a CCRC, that's what we do, then that mindset at a board table, at a senior exec table, will drive decisions forward, as opposed to saying, we are a mission-driven whatever, however you express that. We happen to do CCRCs, but what does the future look like? Because once we're locked into a business model, that will define decisions. And I think we need to challenge ourselves because, boards, senior execs, have become risk averse. And there's good reasons for that. We're stewards of these precious missions, some of which, again, have survived for decades. I sure don't want to scuttle it on my watch. Yet at the same time, we have to find that balance of saying, we're not going to let our business model define mission. We're going to find ways to manage that business model, but then push that envelope out there and find what's next of need in our community and start filling it.
I've heard you say, and Larry Minix, don't fall in love with your product.
That's right.
Fall in love with your mission.
Exactly.
So we've been talking for years about, or hearing for years, about mergers and acquisitions in our field. Yet here's another example where most of the merger and acquisition activity in California has been among the for-profits. And it is rapidly increasing now.
Well,
Why do you think that is, that it's in the for-profit world and not the not-for-profit world?
well, I wish it was an easy answer. The nonprofits, talked a lot about long organizational history, mission, heritage, all that type of thing. The for-profits are going to be quicker moving. They are profit motivated. They will do things that makes their business model better. Generally, they're more transient in their ownership, might flip ownership several times. Everybody in here probably has history in their organization, boards, execs, proud of it. I think you mentioned Larry and his concerns, Larry Minix. I think for those of you who were in attendance last year at Monterey, I think also on a Tuesday morning, Larry was on the stage and he pointed his finger out in a sweeping way across the audience and he said, you guys don't know how to partner. And I don't know how many people that really sunk into. That doesn't simply mean that the answer is a rush to mergers and affiliations. It simply means that we have to become better at working together. We're really good as a nonprofit organization on getting together on fellowship and camaraderie, but we're not really very good about sharing best practices. We're not really very good about trying to come up with cooperative arrangements where we could share expense structures or we could work together in overlapping markets. And I think a lot of that has to do with devotion to our individual organizations and their missions. And I don't think it's an unfair characterization to say we're slow to adapt, we're slow to move, we certainly take less risk than maybe perhaps we once did. And I think the stewardship aspect that David spoke to is a very real one. But I would say, the world's not like it was. It's not a kind, gentle place. The population's accelerating fast. The for-profits are accelerating fast. People who might have picked some of our traditional services 10, 20 years ago are going to have countless other choices that are emerging in the market now, many of those designed to keep them at home and healthier longer. So I think all that comes into play, but it's too simple to just say mergers and affiliations is the answer. There's a lot of other forms it could take.
What do you think the trends are going to be in that arena? I mean, you're seeing, what are you seeing in the PACE arena, Linda?
I think that there are going to be mergers and acquisitions or partnerships as we go forward. If we take a page out of the book of the healthcare arena, you know, there are lots of not-for-profit hospital systems and healthcare systems that have come together. So one that was really shocking in the way it came about was the Hoag St. Joe's affiliation and partnership that came together, where they stayed, you know, true to their core mission, the Catholic Church and the Presbyterian Church, in terms of their mission, but they also said, you know, we'll be better off if we throw the money together and if we choose leaders from both sides of the aisle and we move forward out of our hospital environment, we become community-based, which is where they're headed. I think that's a pretty unusual merger that's happened in the last year. And in fact, it was shocking because St. Joe's is a much larger system, but the leader who was chosen was the CEO of Hoag and a physician. So that was very unusual. Up in the Bay Area, UCSF, so a public hospital, has now affiliated with Children's Hospital Oakland, a classic not-for-profit organization. And again, it's a very unusual affiliation because of the nature of the two organizations. But what they've done is they've partnered from a leadership perspective, thrown their money together so that they can make it go further. And again, they're putting their money out in the community, in the physicians, in research, and where the future really is. I think that PACE organizations are not standalone like my organization or Unlock anymore. Most of them are like Molly's. They're part of a larger organization. And it's very hard to be a standalone organization. So finding different partners and not just looking for the same like organization, but what is going to be important in aging? Is it housing? Is it lots of things? If you look at the FQHCs, they've set up holding companies that do their contracting for them, that borrow money for them, that do all kinds of management services so that they're not spending the same money over and over again, and yet their core values, their core mission, their identity is still there. So there are ways to do this and come together as partners, which may be really an affiliation or a merger behind the scenes, but you can maintain and create yet a new organization. And I've had the opportunity to go through many mergers and acquisitions in my career on the health plan and hospital side, and I would say that when we came out of it, every time it was better. So I'm not fearful.
Doug, in the area of housing companies, be they development companies or management companies, are you seeing people joining forces?
A little bit. I mean, I think it's here and there. It's not as widespread as we would imagine, and I think, you know, for an organization like Mercy, I mean, we've had a lot of different organizations merge into Mercy Housing over the years, and I think, you know, are very open to that, and I see other groups like Satellite and the Affordable Housing Associate merger. But we don't see as much as I think we would have expected, and obviously there's lots of single asset senior, you know, properties out there, and I think that's a world that, you know, if you're just sort of thinking about how you get to scale, it's awfully hard to do it with one-on-one mergers like that. So I think, you know, it'd be interesting to see how many church-sponsored single asset, you know, properties sort of move in that direction over time. I think one of the big issues, and I think it gets to what was said earlier, which is just sort of what really is motivating you to do these things. I mean, a lot of these organizations at some level or another can stand pat. They're not going to make any bigger difference in the world, but their board can say, well, we're self-sustaining, we've met our budget, we're doing all the things we should. There may be 10,000 more people that needed the service than when you started, so your ability to get to your mission seems pretty inadequate, but that doesn't seem to be the question raised at a lot of board meetings. It's, you know, did we do our audit correctly? You know, are the residents in this 50-unit building happy? Okay, let's call it a day.
So what kind of advice would you give to many of the single site or smaller site providers in the audience? Molly, you probably are the one most recently who went from a single site all the way up to now being, just now, this year, being part of the Ziegler 100 multi-systems. Very rapid rise. So as you reflect on that, what kind of advice would you give?
I think that what you're hearing from everyone, is a need to be part of your community. When we're looking to the future and we're looking at opening our door, I had an interview last night with a potential director for our new PACE program. And I said, the biggest issue assisted living providers have, and these are in the for-profit and not-for-profit arena, is medical management. They don't, frankly, do a good job and often get sued over issues because they don't have physician buy-in to help them do their services. Jewish Home has the benefit of having their own medical group, but frankly, they've got more than enough to do with what's interior. We set up the PACE program, and if you have a PACE program in your community and you run assisted living, you could talk and make a partnership with that PACE program to help you provide that difference. That's just one example of a way you can partner. Later today, I'm part of a panel to talk about the needs for special populations. And in talking about that group, I mean, Jewish Home, we've got a waiting list of 350. Yes, we're growing, we're doing all these things. Why are we even talking about that? It's because that is like a huge hole in the future. And it affects aging because used to be, we didn't see that many of developmentally disabled, physically handicapped. They didn't live to be 70, 80, and 90, and they now are. So if they're not your customers today, they will be in 20 years. We have buildings, and we have opportunities for different uses of those buildings. And so again, if you tweak the door and say, okay, what could we do in partnership? Let's have a discussion. We're in discussion on the development for a program we're doing tomorrow we call Connections to Care. And it would be for the marketplace of LA. But it has so excited our partners that we've got Cedars, UCLA, and the Kaiser system, along with 8 hospitals, all agreeing to partner with us. And we've been working on it now for 8 months. There is no partnership within LA that wouldn't be welcome in that. I should say we have the AAA, Area Agency on Aging as well, and USC. So where a not-for-profit can bring a difference is sort of like the paradigm shift we have at looking up if we really want to be accountable for the outcomes of healthcare, and we believe that we have a role to make a difference in that, then changing our mindset to actually open the door to the dialogue. One last thing, I apologize for taking the time. I went to the financing discussion yesterday that Gehm Brothers did with a panel, and Pacific Retirement Systems was there. And I know they went from this little in Oregon to boom, now they're a big presence. And I thought it was all Pacific Retirement, but they've actually done it by helping other not-for-profit CCRCs to merge within their umbrella and to gain the strength of perhaps some better accountability and outcomes and management. But so now instead of 3, I think they're like 7 organizations and much stronger because of that willingness to partner.
Other pieces of advice. Dave?
So, yeah, I think a couple of things. When we think about our kind of smaller, maybe multi-site but smaller, or single-site members, it's counterintuitive to think about it this way. But I would suggest that the right kind of planned, controlled affiliation, slash merger with the right partner might in fact be the best way to preserve mission than anything else you can do as an organization. And that's counterintuitive, particularly counterintuitive to boards who think that because we've done this all these years, and our job at that board table is to steward that mission forward, but counterintuitively, sometimes to actively find the right affiliation is the best thing you can do to make sure that mission is preserved. I think that there's a flip side to this as well, speaking to some of our larger members, and we're one, and there are others around the room or on this panel. I think we have to be careful to respect those smaller organizations and their missions to the point of saying, when we get into a conversation about what the future could be together, we have to stop kind of looking and talking like we have all the answers, and we're kind of the predator here, and we're going to gobble you up. But I think we've got to go at it more with that nonprofit spirit to say, how can we help you preserve mission? And that causes the bigger guys to maybe at times say, well, we might not have the full control we have over other entities, but we want to bring them into the fold because it's the right thing to do. And so I think both, whether you're a large kind of CMO type that has the capacity to help smaller missions, or whether you're a smaller organization that might in fact do better in a larger organization, I think we both have some soul searching to do about what's best for the folks we serve and for the communities that we serve in.
Todd, your Eskaton provides a number of services to non-owned single sites. What's your advice?
Well, I'd like the comments that David just made. A lot of times it is a difficult start of a conversation when a larger organization is helping a smaller organization, and I think you used the word predator even. I don't know if it goes that far, but I think having some early successes together. We've found a lot of success lately, and it's been every bit as good for us as the folks who've been able to assist in helping single sites, either that are struggling with SNF operations or assisted living, or even something as general as IT infrastructure or HR or things like that, just because single sites by nature, even the best of them, are going to have some limited capacity or resources to do larger, more complicated things in a faster moving world. So, but I think a mutual respect, big or little, size to size or missize to missize is a very important part of it. But I think having, as I said, early steps together to see how you might work together is a real good way to at least get things started. And I think reaching out is important. I know a lot of people have spoken to the importance of the single sites, and particularly having vulnerability just by definition as single sites. I think their boards and their chief executives need to do a good job of sort of an objective environmental scanning, because generally they're going to reach out before the larger organizations reach out.
All right, let me move to another hot topic that we have been talking about and struggling with particularly the last 2 years, which is the void in financing of affordable housing. Doug, what's going to fill that? No more redevelopment, no more HUD money, basically?
Well, so, I mean, I wish it was a foregone conclusion that something was going to fill the void.
Yeah.
So I think the first thing to say is that it's not incredibly clear that there is the momentum, either nationally or within California, to do anything about this problem. And I mean, I think there are a lot of different factors. Obviously, at the federal level, there's just an incredibly low appetite for any kind of spending and appropriations. And I think if you look at senior affordable housing, it's been an appropriations-driven business, very risk-averse nonprofit structure. And I don't want to say it's dead, but it's not going to be vibrant for a very long time. And I think anybody who's hoping that suddenly there's going to be a new round of Section 202 funding or whatever it may be, just because we all know there's a need, I'm sorry to say that's not going to get you much.
Right.
I wish it were. If need were really driving this, I think we really obviously would see a lot more activity at this level. But at the state level, obviously about $1 billion or more has gone out of the system. When you add on the federal money and a whole bunch, you're talking about $1.5 billion out of the affordable housing production field. And not all of it for senior housing for sure, but many seniors living in multifamily apartment buildings. There's just a lot less happening. I would say there was a lot of confusion that came out of the foreclosure crisis. So, the governor was one of those who said a few times, well, don't worry about it. We've got all these, foreclosed or underwater homes. That'll be our affordable housing reservoir. Well, we got a drought now. So that we got a problem. And we have a governor who really fundamentally has articulated that he doesn't understand, and I don't want to go so far as to say doesn't care, but it comes close to that level of articulation in terms of his unwillingness to even engage on the issue, I don't think he sees it as a top 5 or maybe even a top 20 issue in the state. So I think one of the big things I think we all have to face, and in the senior world as well as the broader affordable housing world, is we've got a huge way to go on advocacy. We have basically become, I think you said it well, Molly, very, very insular. We're happy to provide mission to our residents. Some of us are very good at getting out there and talking to folks on a regular basis, but by and large, we're not. And if you sort of see what's moving in the world right now in affordable housing, I think we're going to see a little bit of activity on kind of related issues. So it looks like there might be an opportunity for some money coming out of climate change. The cap and trade dollars at the state level is the latest opportunity. You know, when we tried to run a bill related to document recording fee, the realtors came out and just sort of pushed back really hard. And by and large, there was no real way to respond because we're not a particularly well-organized constituency and weren't able to kind of get them to see our way. Veterans, I think, is an issue that's going to move forward because there's just an incredibly strong need and a lot of broad-based support for doing something about veterans in light of what's going on. But for seniors, there's basically, I don't hear any activity at all. So I think what it says to me is I think there's really two choices. Really, one is we would have to become incredibly good at organizing ourselves and advocating for the need we've got. I don't see that occurring, not because I don't want it to, but I don't see signs that that's occurring. And on the other side, where I think I do see a lot more activity, and I think the panel has gotten to it, is trying to figure out what our new value proposition is and how we relate that to partnerships. And I think we're going to talk about CalMedi Connect and some of the other changes to the Affordable Care Act. So it's a different path forward. It says, you know, I'm no longer able to convince folks that there needs to be a big, large federal subsidy or state subsidy program to push this forward. I'm going to a parallel conversation that says we provide tremendous value in terms of healthcare and wellness, and we want to get funded from a different set of opportunities that is, frankly, much more entrepreneurial than most of the field is today. And so I don't know that everybody moves in that direction. I don't know that it isn't, I mean, what I hope is that there'll be a few people that really strike out and really show people how to operate a business model. I think the single asset or single site organizations, I think to Molly's example, would really benefit from being in those types of partnerships. I mean, you know, Mercy's in those types of organizations. We're all small compared to the healthcare world. And so I think, you know, that's the path I see emerging now. I really wish there were a little balance between the two sides, but to be honest with you, I don't see our field or our movement making enough noise to make a difference at the moment.
Well, there's a lot of discussion about whether the healthcare dollars could flow more into the affordable housing to pay for the value that housers bring, particularly under the dual eligible California project. Do you see that happening?
Well, I've been an advocate for that long before I got into the PACE arena, and in fact, I was working with Mercy Housing to try and access some of those dollars, but the healthcare providers and others will look at that as a threat. So it's a way of coming together without threatening each other, bringing the value proposition and demonstrating what you can bring to the table. I think it's also partnering, maybe even reaching across the aisle to for-profit housing and saying, you know, at some point, we'll get together as enough of a group to force you, just like has happened in non-senior housing, you'll have to have a certain amount of affordable housing before you get the chance to build something else. So is it better to invent that and to create that and to design those regulations or design that process ourselves? Yes. So I think that if you go back to the entrepreneurial spirit of not-for-profits and you put the right group together to define the right value proposition and you give it a try, that's where the money is that can make this happen. It's a cost shift, just like in healthcare. Healthcare has been financed off of commercial insurance and Medicare. That's how Cal and Medicaid has been funded, and it will continue to be so. If we don't believe that is happening, I don't know, we've got our heads in the sand. So I think you just translate that kind of a story to another area, and I think it will move forward.
And I think for housing providers, we've been approached by a number of entities to deal with behavioral health people. And one of the things that I find interesting, because in a former life I worked with the Housing Authority and the government, and they always deal with that population in housing projects. And they have a difficulty not in just dealing with them, but in managing their care. And I think affordable housing, there is money in the ACOs and the healthcare plans are all interested because they now have a responsibility for the actual care for mental health that they never had before. With all the parity on dealing with physical illness the same way, and dealing with mental health the same way they deal with physical. So I think there are opportunities. We were told that if we would provide the space, that they would pay to help us finish the structure. They would pay for a nurse practitioner to do med management. They would pay for some caregiving staff and other things. My board was reluctant because they don't want that population in the middle of a campus. So we have some additional properties that we're still willing to have the discussion, will this work? Does it make sense to do it? But it's an opportunity to partner with affordable care, where if you have the components of a PACE program or something like that, a medical component, assisted living, can be simple as providing meals and transportation to help those individuals get assistance from the HUD or the Farmers Home Project or Affordable to get to the services that they need. We had the good fortune to have adjacent to one of our campuses, the Menorah Housing, a facility with that organization. I know Ann is here at this conference today. We started the relationship with Menorah Housing because we have security guards, so we include their property when our security guard wanders. We also wanted them to be volunteers, so we have 2 hours you work with us, you get a free meal. So we get residents from there coming over because it helps their budget. We also then said, well, gee, on Friday night for Jews, it's important to have Shabbat dinner, and the holidays we make available for them to come over. So they come over for that. Again, costs us almost nothing. But in return, we get clients referred over. We get a volunteer workforce that makes us a better organization. And it's all sort of beneath the purview of anybody. Then we turned around and said, okay, are there other opportunities now that we could partner? So affordable housing is now looking and being encouraged by HUD, which was a miracle. I don't know how you guys did that, but it's really a miracle, to think that they could do more to age him well in place. So HUD did have a small amount of money to retrofit existing spaces to provide community programming. And PACE is a really great partner for that. But if there is no PACE, then a CCRC or a SNF or an assisted living provider who has a physician and a nurse practitioner component, that's a value add that you could bring.
David.
So I think the one path forward in terms of advocacy around affordable housing is to, and Doug said this well, right? So the business models we've been advocating for in the past, 202 for instance, is really not, to continue to advocate for that is just a dead end, right? Yep. So the old saying, if the horse is dead, dismount. Time to move on. So.
Is that a saying?
It is.
It
is. That's a
never made it west of the Rockies. I don't know what to tell you.
There's your Midwestern wisdom for the day. Okay. So, we've really got to position affordable housing in this new healthcare space, and we know, but we've got to convince policymakers, ACOs, health systems that affordable housing is in fact the workbench, if you will, where we can actually bend the cost curve. And we spent a lot of time on the skilled side, rehab side, talking about the post-acute work we can do to help bend the cost curve. But I would suggest we need to adopt the language that affordable housing for us is the pre-acute work we can do to prevent hospitalizations before they begin by delivering the kinds of service. And if you take that approach and consider it as the workbench for really good wellness and health care to get at those duals, then we can create a dialogue, I think, that can move this forward. Because if you think about it, the cost of delivering the housing component of an amenity-rich program the cost of the housing is actually minuscule compared to the healthcare dollars we can prevent. And we've got to make that case in each state and certainly nationally. But I think we've got to think about that as the pre-acute world, and we can own it.
So, you know, I think that's right. I think that is where the biggest opportunity is, and you know, I don't know if that's exactly what the Jewish Home is doing, but I guess what I'd say is, you know, when Linda and I spent a solid year working on this together, I mean, I think what I came to the realization that no matter how much I wanted the healthcare world to understand the value we were creating, we were still a little ways away from being any place where that money was going to flow. So I think on our side, what I think we've sort of said to ourselves is, let's demonstrate that what we do, if you crosswalk it to the world of healthcare, it is very close to being care management. And
right.
it doesn't have to have all of the components of care management because these are systems, not, you know, individuals. And so we have a lot of the functionality. We can produce a lot of the benefit. You don't have to produce it all. You don't have to go from being an affordable housing provider to suddenly having a bunch of nurses and doctors on staff. You know, I think what we've discovered over the years, and I suspect you have too, is that, first of all, housing is among the most important kind of wellness things you can provide to somebody, right? And then on top of which, you know, most of us have great social activities. We break down isolation. We're referring people to every activity. We're partnering with people with paratransit or meals or whatever it is. So if you just look at what we do and sort of reach out and sort of describe yourself differently, I think there are opportunities today. And then the question is, in a year or 2 years, are we going to be smart enough and sophisticated enough as a field to evaluate, measure, demonstrate that there's something there that is not medical necessarily, although obviously there's a medical model, but for Mercy, which is a non-medical model, it's a social model that nonetheless produces tremendous health benefits.
Right.
And so in this room, I suspect there's every type of organization that can get at that wellness health curve in a different kind of way. And so I think that the biggest challenge really, and this is where Linda and I spent a lot of time, is trying to figure out what that business model looks like. So if you have a building, 150 units in your building today, and people ranging from, you know, age 65 to 95 with all sorts of different levels of health, you're not going to be able to fund a huge program off of that because it's just the variation within the building. So you'll be able to deliver care and management, and you'll be able to step up what you're providing and make a difference in terms of healthcare and the lives of your residents. If what you're looking to do is expand the amount of affordable housing out there in the world, it's probably a different model. It probably is a little bit more like the post-acute model where you're saying, give us the most difficult people for you to serve that still don't need to be in a nursing home, and we can make that work, but we're going to charge you a lot more. And I think, you know, again, we're nonprofits. I mean, I challenge my staff on a regular basis to say, please don't tell me what it costs, tell me what it's worth. And I think that that's the attitude we have to bring into these conversations with folks. It's not, oh, reimburse me the $22,000 that my service provider pays me, and I'm going to stay in the same ridiculously fragile state as a nonprofit, working from month to month to see if I can feed my staff. But really trying to say, what's the value I provide in the world? How do I really bring that value into the organization so that I can do other stuff? It's incredibly hard to be a risk taker if you're worried about next month's payroll or even next year's payroll or anything else. And so I think we have to, without betraying our nonprofit mission, we have to be smarter about grabbing the value that we've got and then applying it to other parts of our organization, just like some of the groups here do with their market rate programs. So.
Now, many of the members here have reached out beyond their walls into the broader world of home and community-based services, and some have not. Where do you see the greatest opportunities for doing that, Todd?
Well, in all of our communities. I mean, everybody's familiar with the stat, 10,000 people a day turning 65, 90+% of those at home wishing to remain at home. That's certainly our primary emphasis now. Like many people, we slowed down a little bit bricks and mortars for many reasons, one of which was the 5-year recessionary period, so we turned our attentions elsewhere. But the practical matter is that's where they are. So we even, just for strategic planning purposes, had turned the discussion around. It sounds very Norman Rockwellish to say 90% of the people would have to stay at home. But what if you said 90% of the people would like to stay at home? What if you turned around and said 90% of the people will have to stay at home, irrespective of what they want? Then you have to start putting your attention to, well, you know, how do you solve transportation? How do you solve socialization? how do you, nutrition, the physical environment of the home. A lot of people move into communities simply because they can't navigate around their home anymore. So universal design is a big deal. So we've started turning our attention to all that. And we find partnering with other providers out there is very important to that. I think care management is one thing that brings a lot of efforts together. And I think there needs to be a really more highly developed system of care managers that, whether it's acute or post-acute or whoever it is, that coordinate a lot of these things. That's where they're going to be. So the hard part is getting out of the provider mindset. We need to take the solution out to them. You have to look for the cooperative systems. We just started a new program in partnership with 3 others out in a large Sun City development in Lincoln, California, and it starts off with little more than resource assistance and care management. We have one of the partners who can provide personal home care to those residents. They recognize that they're in an active adult community that's aging, and the blueprint for that type of active adult community was no services infrastructure. So they're receptive to that too, but they're also hesitant. The biggest thing we found out, being an organization like many of us in here that has spent decades and decades and decades having discussions with people that are need-driven, is to go out and start having discussions with people that don't recognize it yet or don't want to recognize it yet. And one of the biggest ahas I've gotten on this journey of ours out there is that the people who are in a position to be the most proactive, to take steps to maintain their independence longer are often the ones that are most resistant to start that conversation. But I think it has to be more out in home and community based. But that's where you see a lot of frankly wonderful or for-profit entrepreneur work. And I think you need to have discussions with those people and partner with them.
David, your organization has made a major push out into the community. Where do you see the opportunities for our members here?
So about 8 years ago, our ratio flipped for the first time, where we actually serve more people in their homes than in facilities and buildings that we own or manage. And that has just continued to be the trend. So I think, for us, the opportunity is to think about building essentially, home care competence as an extension of the work you already do. So it's not a new thing. Care delivery model is new, but the fact is we have for years, you have too, been delivering care down hallways, in bedrooms, in living rooms, usually pretty tightly controlled environments. And I think the opportunity is for us to think about just extending that care out into the community, leveraging your brand, which is trusted locally, and beginning to extend that out, and not to think about it as, some new big initiative, but as an extension of what you already know and do. It's care management and it's care delivery. The business model changes, but the core mission is still the same. And I think the opportunity is there. Todd said this. I mean, the business is out there, right? The needs are out there, and so you don't have to do significant business reconnaissance to figure this out. There's a huge market growing, and I think the other thing to think about is to think about the value added that your organization can provide over and above what your competition may be, particularly for-profit competition. Because what we have done for years is we've engaged families in the care of their loved ones. And we teach them about disease states, and we help them care better, right? And so if all we're going to do is think of that unit of delivery of an hour of home care, then we're heading towards just kind of commoditizing the entire thing. And then it's a race to the bottom in terms of, all you're competing on is price. But the value-added wrap that we can give is the same value-added wrap that we give to the care we provide inside our facilities, inside our CCRCs and apartments. And that is engaging that family, teaching, and helping them be better at helping mom and dad age. And so don't miss that opportunity to wrap that value. And it's not new, it's what we've always done. That's the beauty of it. It's right in our wheelhouse.
So PACE programs, you both operate PACE programs. They've been considered a home and community-based service since their inception. How does PACE look at that, about taking that kind of competence and moving that out in other ways? And how come it hasn't happened yet in all the history of PACE?
I'll let you go first.
I guess I think that part of it is, and this is true, that's been talked about before here, is we define ourselves as our business,
Yeah.
which is PACE, which today includes a PACE center and includes a clinic and includes a blah, blah, blah. There finally are some regulations that allow you to get out there and really begin to take it forward. But if you look at our nation, even the frailest of people, people who are home on a ventilator, the majority of their care is provided by their family member. Maybe shocking to people, but that's the way it is. Home dialysis, there's no skilled person out there helping somebody do that. So it's embracing that and taking aspects of PACE, uncoupling that, and partnering with the community and with other organizations, other housing providers, other places where there's scale and there's a grouping of people. But we've also got to get out to the community at large. If you look at the number of baby boomers who have saved no money to retire, and you look at the retirement systems, there are going to be more and more people who are going to be living in their homes, who are going to be looking and demanding, as we always have been as baby boomers, of everything that be done the way we want it to be done. There's a huge opportunity here for the not-for-profit, for the PACE arena to get out there and to begin to partner with others. I think one of the problems for all not-for-profits is we think we have to own and control everything. That if you can't swallow the elephant, as Doug says, and can't have everything, then we don't want to do it. It's acknowledging that it takes a very interesting group of providers, and the healthcare folks have figured that out. They understand that all the care management, transition management, and med management in the world isn't going to help somebody who doesn't have stable housing.
Right.
That's one of the aspects of PACE. PACE has been able to provide services in housing and access money. It will take legislative change to broaden that, and it needs to happen because it's a much less expensive way to take care for people. And it leverages those family caregivers who are out there, who are the majority of who it's going to have to be going forward. A lot of it's going to have to be unpaid care.
Molly, your take?
I think historically, PACE has been handicapped by the same thing we all deal with, be it skilled nursing or CCRC, in that the regulations put sort of a box you're in.
Yeah.
So for PACE, for years, if you went into PACE, you had to have the PACE doctor. You had to give up your doctor. And that is in the process of changing, so PACE organizations can now get approval for a community doctor to be the PACE doctor and work within the program. What intrigues me most about PACE is the ability it has to drop aside, if you will, the box of PACE and create a menu of all the different things PACE does, from in-home care to removing architectural barriers to the site work of bringing somebody in for an adult care center experience, to the physician component or the therapy or whatever. You can create a menu out of that and then work with a assisted living or a basic RCFE provider or affordable housing to say, these are services we can provide a la carte. And we're talking to LA Care and HealthNet about developing a menu so that they have individuals that they know have certain needs. How can our menu accommodate? What might they buy? What might they not need? And then sell those services, if you will, as a care coordination complement to them.
Okay.
And I don't know any PACE provider in the state that is not looking at that.
Good, good. Now, Todd, you mentioned the for-profit entrepreneurs out there who are doing some amazing things. That brings to mind the whole topic of disruptors to our field. What do you think the disruptors will be? Will it be the Walgreens, CVS Minute Clinics? Will it be technology? Will it be for-profit entrepreneurs who come up with brand new approaches that we haven't even thought about?
Well, I'll start. I think technology will absolutely be one. The only thing about technology is it evolves and changes so fast nobody can get a clear idea exactly what its impact will be, but I don't think anybody would argue that it's not going to have quite a substantial impact. The others is, you know, take Walgreens. What they have 80, I think I've heard they've had 8,600 stores across the U.S. They've formed 3 different ACOs now, I think in New Jersey, Florida, and Texas. They're looking at different models. I think in our group here, we tend to be kind of, for the most part, I know we have PACE and some other things, but for the most part, the membership's kind of polarized between CCRCs and affordable housing. So I don't know how much attention everybody pays to really how rapidly the for-profits are coming on in independent and assisted living and memory care, and particularly in home and community-based services, which is kind of quiet. I had the opportunity recently to sit next to the senior vice presidents of innovation and strategy for both Brookdale and Emeritus, and we were chatting. And I think just on the just on the Emeritus side, they've purchased 50 licensed home care agencies. They say they're growing personal home care organically within, but you know, everybody knows they have 1,100 buildings and 112,000 apartments, but they plan in the very near future to be delivering far more services to people in their homes than they do in assisted living. And I would argue that's a good thing. You know, if 1 in 5 Americans by 2030 is going to be over the age of 65, I don't think everybody who wants to throw their hat in the ring currently is going to meet that need. So I think there has to be disruptive. I think people have an inherent discomfort in not knowing what that looks like today. But I think it's not a matter of, and I'll mischaracterize this to make the point, it's not a matter of the nonprofits are good and everybody else is bad. I think what we're going to have to start doing as our niche in the world becomes a smaller piece of the total pie, still very valuable, I think we need to stop speaking so much to what our value is and start demonstrating more what our value is, and that's going to go by a lot of the big data gathering that's going to be demanded of everybody that's providing services. So, but
I would
I think
also
it's very
say,
intriguing to watch.
to add on to that, the generation before baby boomers, 8% of them got older and have no children. Either their children died or they didn't have children. But for baby boomers, 16% have no children as they get older. Double the number we have today. So for in-residence in our 1,000 units of housing, 1/3 of them have no living family member for us to deal with.
Yeah.
And we prioritize to admit for social isolation. But if you look at just that statistic and then look at what we're saying about the potential to go into the homes and take the service you have within your organization now that it's a skill set. If you have a great social work staff, and that social work staff could actually go next door to the affordable housing or across the street to a Belmont or a Sunrise, and you could partner to do some care management services. And if you're in a small community and you go locally to, I don't know, the healthcare plan or a large physician group or the hospital and talk about these things with really lay out on a piece of paper what you think you could do,
Molly,
you may find it open.
who in that area that you're talking about, though, who do you think would be the potential disruptors? Somebody to come in around you, under you, beside you, and
Oh, the for-profits are the biggest disruptor because they come in and
You
they
think?
can go to scale.
yeah,
And the scale will hurt us. I agree with the technology because that's going to be
Yeah.
a huge issue for
Yeah.
us. But the ability to go to scale, which is why I keep saying look out your window, but years ago I used to run all the time and I used to get on my running clothes at noon and go for a run instead of eating. But the advantage of that is you find right around the corner from you, you have a doctor's office with 6 doctors.
Yeah.
Or you have Menorah Housing Agency right next door because you take a walk in your neighborhood.
Here's your competitive intelligence model, Molly.
Right.
Run at lunchtime.
Yes, run it like
Now we know why you look so good.
Doug, what do you see as the disruptors?
You know, I mean, I think we're sort of in the health space in terms of this conversation at the moment. I mean, one disruptor obviously is the fact that the way people think about government and what government can provide has shifted dramatically. And so probably a negative disruptor. I mean, I think the image we have of sort of government playing a role in sort of addressing these issues or at least resourcing them, you know, it'll be a little while before that comes back. So I think that's a significant disruption. And then the other piece, again, I think that we've all kind of alluded to is, you know, as the world moves from fee-for-service to an outcome-based approach, there are opportunities for folks, and speed matters. I'll say Mercy's not the fastest horse that David might dismount. Hopefully we're not dead yet. But I do think that the ability to react with speed and really get to this stuff is gonna make a difference in terms of, like, it's not that people can't see what's emerging, it's your ability to get there at a certain pace, no pun intended, and really deliver something that people can get to. And I think the challenge for most of us in the field really is, at least in affordable housing, we haven't measured anything in most of our existences. I mean, we measure occupancy and vacancy, and sometimes losses related to vacancy or other stuff like that. But we're not particularly good at measuring the things that really matter. And so, I mean, again, I do think this is where maybe as nonprofits we have an opportunity with each other is if our ultimate goal is to grow and achieve the mission, we ought to be better than we are at sort of sharing sort of what we think matters and helping each other understand sort of what types of measurement and tracking are really going to make the point. I don't know that I don't think that there are for-profits that are going to do that well. I think there clearly are, but I think together we might have an advantage that we don't have alone, which is just to really kind of be clear with each other about where we think we create value.
All right, I'd like to conclude our session this morning with a question for each of you. A quick answer, a kind of a lightning round to this. If you were to select one mindset change that we the members here need to adopt to be successful in the future, what would it be? David, you want to start?
Yeah, so I would go back to a point that we've talked about already, and that is, I think the mindset that we need to really work on is the shift from defining mission by business models and define it by community need, and see where that gets us.
Okay, Todd.
I would say it would be accept change and pay attention to what's going on around you. There was a book, and I forget the name of it, but the idea was about signals. It's about there's nothing new out there. If you pay attention to what's going on around you, you will see early indicators of change. And so I would say be open to change and pay attention to what's going on around you.
Okay. Linda.
I would say it's actually listening for the needs out there. We think we know what the needs are, and if we went out and we talked to the baby boomers and we really understood what was there, I think the opportunities will emerge, embracing change, not being afraid, thinking as far out as we can think, which will get us back closer to where we are, will get us much further, and getting past the point of the distinction between partnering with somebody who's for-profit or not-for-profit. All the health plans are for-profit. Every one of us in this room is partnering with for-profits. It's nothing new, and I think there's an opportunity to bring everybody together for something better.
Doug.
I think all these are good answers, and I like them better than mine. So, but if I had to say it, I would say the mindset that would be interesting would be to think about all the people that you'd like to serve with your mission that you currently don't. how could you get to them? And can you get to them with your current business model, or do you need to do something in order to grow the impact you have? I think we're all very good at, well, hopefully, many of us are very good at serving the people that we currently serve, and struggle to figure out how to get to more people.
And Molly, besides running at lunch, what do you say?
I like that one.
Yeah.
I think that we have to realize that as not-for-profits, we sit here and we all think we run the organization. We forget that behind us is a board of directors which has their own mindset about where they see us going. And as one of my board members said to me, don't talk to me about a loss. Not-for-profit doesn't lose, it invests. And so the mindset I would like to see all of us change is not my board won't let me. The mindset we need to change is part of our job is to train our boards, educate them, and get them to open up their mindset and explore new possibilities. Because it doesn't matter what you decide to do if you take it to your board and they won't go there and the horse dies under you. So, and we've all had that great idea.
I think that'll be the theme for next year's conference meeting.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in a round of applause for our terrific panel.